2024 rookie draft is approaching. So we are going to break down our first big board. This is going to be much more representative of how we are going to rank these guys from a dynasty basketball perspective. So my name is Andrew. I am your host. This is Angle Fantasy Basketball. We pretty much have met our 1 year anniversary of being around. Just wanted to thank everybody for following us so far. We're going to do things a little bit differently than we did last year. So our first big board is going to be represented through this video here. Soon we are going to do another big board, which is going to be released as a Google document. Today we're only covering the lottery 14. So I am joined by another analyst at Angle, Mitchell. He and I are partnered in doing exclusively our rookie draft coverage for Angle. So Mitchell, how are you doing today, buddy? You ready to talk about some rookies?
Yeah, Andrew, this is honestly both of our favorite times of the year, evaluating prospects. And now that we got the real mock draft out of the way, this is our bread and butter. Can we predict these incoming rookies to translate into fantasy basketball or dynasty basketball assets moving forward? And hopefully we did a great job. Me and Andrew compiled this list together for lottery for our top 14. And we hope we can provide you with that resource in your dynasty leagues and hopefully get an edge over your league mates.
All right, so let's start us off here. I feel like this is, I'm finally getting an opportunity to talk about Alex Sarr. So Alex Sarr seems to be the consensus for going number 1 overall in the real life draft, in addition to being either number 1 or pretty close to it in regards to dynasty rankings of the incoming rookie class. So with Alex Sarr, especially, honestly, if he's going 1 or 2 to either the Wizards or the Hawks, I love both of those landing spots for him. Both of those teams need a player like him, providing the defensive stats, providing rebounds, and what we really want to see is the swing skill, is the scoring. He does have potential to hit 3-pointers. So if he can end up at least putting up, being like a Bobby Portis, but with actual defensive production instead of the real Bobby Portis who doesn't put up defense, so threes, points, rebounds, and defense, we can be looking at a very good 9-category fantasy player. So that's why we're going to go with Sarr for 1 overall. There's some other good guys out there, but just fantasy basketball ranking, especially if we're talking about like redraft Yahoo rankings, they're going to favor guys that put up good defense with low turnovers. And I think that is what Alex Sarr is going to provide.
So I'll take the next one. At number 2, we have Reed Sheppard, someone who in the advanced stats and, just statistical translations would in theory become the best fantasy contributor in this class. However, Reed Sheppard, he is only 6'1", 6'2" with shoes. He's not the most athletic. I mean, he is athletic vertically, but not, I would say, agility-wise. But Reed Sheppard is someone who I was debating with myself. Andrew knows this. If he should be the real 1.01 in dynasty, rookie drafts, but I'm not completely sold yet, just because Alex Sarr does have a great baseline on what he can provide. So let's say Alex Sarr is a Nick Claxton at worst with a little bit more playmaking and athletic ability. That's still a top 50 asset. Reed Sheppard, he may only be a 3-point shooter who doesn't develop in his pick and roll or his assist numbers, just like a 3-point shooter with great steals numbers, and doesn't really develop his offensive role as one of the offensive engines. But there is that chance, because of those statistical translations, where he can become a top 20 contributor in his prime. So that's why we have him at number 2, just because of his physical limitations and a lot of question marks on that end.
Let's move on to number 3 now. So we have Donovan Clingan here. So same to what I said with Alex Sarr, fantasy rankings and 9-category rankings could really be favorable to provided defense. With Clingan, you're looking at the big man stats, good field goal percentage, probably poor free throw percentage, decent amount of points, mainly being a rim running center, rebounds, and blocks. Not much provided in the way of assists, but for 9-category rankings, you can usually, especially in their prime, you saw stretches in the top 100 for guys like Clint Capella, Steven Adams, Rudy Gobert has been a staple in the top 100 for a while now, nine cat ranking wise. So even guys who are poor at hitting their free throws, they do have that value when they provide extra boosts in other categories. So especially if you're a punt free throws team, then Donovan Clingan's your guy. From a dynasty's perspective, obviously, if someone tanked and got a top 3 spot, this is a really safe person to build your roster around because he has something that people are looking for in the modern center in the NBA. Obviously, it'd be nice if he can shoot, but that's such a rarity, especially for guys of his size. It's only like Wemby and Kristaps and guys like that who can actually shoot and are that size. So we're gonna, of course, expect him to be, more like the baseline base archetype of rim running center. Like, we'll name some other names. Mark Williams, for example, Nick Claxton, like Mitch mentioned earlier, is another example. Clingan's just gonna fit right into that mold and be another one of those guys. And those guys do have good 9 category value, especially in a punt free throw situation. So that's where I go
Andrew,
for Clingan.
but before we move on Clingan, I want to ask you something. Do you
Okay.
believe Clingan can reach those Brooke Lopez type 3 and D numbers, where Brooke Lopez is a top 20, 25 contributor? Or do you think Clingan kind of caps out as like a Walker Kessler type, where he is just rebounds, some points, good field goal, and block numbers? Or do you buy those, workout warrior videos where Donovan Clingan is nailing like 10 threes in a row?
I think no. I mean, all players of all types and positions practice threes. So it's him standing still with no defense in front of him shooting wide open threes. I think if someone's going to be more likely to put up a stat set similar to what Brooke Lopez can do, it would probably be Alex Sarr. I mean, I think if Clingan really hits a high ceiling and we see a very elevated 9 category production out of Clingan, it would look more like a Rudy Gobert. So inflated points, inflated rebounds, good steals from the center position, and blocks as well too, and then a very highly inflated field goal percentage as well too. I think at his best, that's what his 9 category stat set's gonna look like, more closer to something like Gobert.
Yeah, so I'll start us off with Rob Dillingham. Rob Dillingham is probably the best offensive creator, the best offensive engine in this year's draft. He's someone who's also very efficient. He has good shooting splits, and he has posted a lot of great playmaking chops in the pick and roll at Kentucky. Another thing I forgot to mention with Reed Sheppard is that Kentucky guard effect, right? So there's so many guards that get drafted in the teens from Kentucky. You look at Emmanuel Quickly, Tyrese Maxey, Devin Booker, SGA outside of the top 10. Jamal Murray was the exception going in the mid lottery. But with that being said, Rob Dillingham has that Kentucky guard effect. He's a great offensive creator. A lot of people are a little bit down on his weight. He weighs 164 pounds. But if you're someone who's able to create and separate space and use speed to your advantage, you're going to see a very high upside and range of productivity. You think of Darius Garland, who's someone's a similar build. I know, Andrew, you're not too high on Darius Garland, but at peak Darius Garland before the jaw injury, before he wasn't able to eat or whatnot this year because of that, he was posting like top 50 numbers. Maybe there's some little Kyrie in him because of his creation ability. His ability to finish at the rim is very great for someone his size. But the lack, which really puts Rob outside of the top 3 for us, is his defensive contributions and whether he can stay on the floor because of that. And I want to get your thoughts on Dillingham, Andrew, because I know you were high on him beginning of the year.
Yeah, I usually do like guys of his archetype, guys that are extremely fast and shifty and have a very tight handle of the ball too. Those are generally guys that I gravitate towards, and especially too how creative of a finisher he is, how balanced he is. Different clips of him scooping his arm in between 2 defenders for a layup, things like that. It actually is reminiscent of Kyrie Irving. I'd never really thought of that comparison before. Not to say he's going to put up those stats, because obviously he'd be first overall on this big board if he would. But just for like some of these creative flashes, it just reminds you kind of more of like an old school player, or like, a street ball type of player, or just flashy, tricky kind of guy. Jamal Crawford being another example. We could even point towards Allen Iverson as another example. Dillingham kind of fits that older or like early 2000s type of mold. But what is most lacking in his game is going to be the defense, like you mentioned, and his size, especially his weight. If he went through a proper training camp, he could probably make the 145-pound division in the UFC. So for someone who's playing NBA basketball, going up against some bigger guards, he's going to need to put some weight on. So that's going to take us to number 5. So this is somebody that Mitch and I actually got to scout in person. So Mitch, before we get started, I want to ask you this question. We scouted a few prospects in person this year. Would you not agree with me that Ron Holland was definitely the most impressive one that we saw?
Oh, definitely. Ron Holland, we went to one of probably his best game of the year. I mean, outside of those games against Alex Sarr and the Perth Wildcats, but Ron Holland was hitting threes. He was driving to the lane. He was getting steals. And on a statistical level, he was asked to be that number one option on the Ignite. And he really showcased that by and he really showcased his ability to produce those counting stats and defensive numbers that we truly love in a category league. Um, there are rumors about Ron Holland slipping outside of the lottery, which I think is a big mistake. And that might even play to his advantage playing for a team that has more veterans around him that can teach him the right way to play. Maybe he could play off the ball, something that he wasn't used to on the Ignite, and learning all those intangibles that are going to be so valuable for him to be a sound defender and also an offensive engine. And that's something that's really impressive with Ron Holland is his engine. He's someone that goes balls to the walls, will get you the stats you want, and that's why we have him at top 5. So I know, Andrew, this is your guy. Is there something about Ron Holland that you are extremely excited about in terms of a fantasy 9 category profile?
Yeah, just the sheer volume of what he could potentially do, points, rebounds, assists, and steals. And from what I saw at the game that we attended, he was the only guy that was like an actual, like, at least star on the court of what we were watching. It was basically the South Bay Lakers versus Ron Holland. The rest of his Ignite teammates, Matas Buzelis was not playing, weren't really helping him. So it was very impressive to see him basically on his own still put up 20 points against the South Bay Lakers, who I know are usually pretty good in the G League too. With Ron Holland as well, he is younger. And, we might even be looking at a Cam Whitmore situation, not because he's injured. He's not injured like Whitmore was, but he might fall down to a team that's actually a better landing spot for him, like the Rockets were. And then we look back wondering why he fell that far. So I hope a lottery team still does take him because I think he does have or represent a lot of upside from a fantasy perspective and in real life too. I think he's one of the most exciting players to watch of all of the ones that are on this board right now. So there's a lot going for Holland, but the negativity around him as well makes him somebody we're going to be watching very closely.
And I know he has a workout that he scheduled with the Lakers
Let's
at pick
go.
17.
Oh,
So
I would love it.
how pissed would you be if the Lakers chose Bronny James over Ron Holland?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if I would watch this year if they did that, dude. That would be. You would think though that they would just get a guarantee from Bronny, like, okay, I will refuse to sign anywhere else and sign to you guys. I think the Lakers have a pick in like it's like 53 or 56 or something like that.
55. I think it's
55.
55.
Yeah. So they might just get to agreement to do that, or to be go undrafted and just sign an undrafted deal like Austin Reeves in his first year. So yeah, we'll see, but they will definitely break my heart if they take Bronny James over Ron Holland if he somehow manages to fall to 17. That'll hurt.
Mm-hmm. All right, so I'll take the next one with Nikola Topic. A lot of controversy with this guy. If he wasn't injured, he'd probably easily be in the top 3 for us. Just because of the injuries, he had an ankle injury and now he tore his ACL. And then there are also, rumors that he had a 7-foot wingspan earlier in the pre-draft process, which was debunked last week, where he did have a 6'5" negative wingspan. So there is a lot of like lying in his camp and manipulation potentially to increase his draft stock. So it soured a lot of people in the wrong way. But there's no doubt that if everything clicks, Nikola Topic is someone who can provide high assists. He's a great finisher. He's highly intelligent and he knows how to play the right way. There is some hope that he can translate to a 3-point shooter because he shot, I believe, 87% from the line. So he has a very clean statistical profile. It's just the injuries and the manipulation from his camp that kind of just steers us a little bit down and which makes us put him at number 6. Andrew, any thoughts on Topic?
Yeah, the one thing I'll say is that his pre-draft comparison a lot was Jumbo Goran Dragic. Now it's just regular Goran Dragic because of the wingspan issue. That's pretty much all I'll add right here. So Goran Dragic is still a good player, and like's been mentioned a lot, this is a role player draft. Obviously, Topic is potential to be better than that, but if you end up, spending a pick and getting someone like that produces like Goran Dragic did in his prime and in his early years,
He was a
that's
one-time All-Star too. Goran Dragic was an All-Star.
there we go. So that's still pretty good. So I really do like Topic. I would like to put him up, but I think my agreeing to move him down is weighted more towards the wingspan misconception or whatever you want to call it, as opposed to the injury. Because I want to avoid what we did bringing up Cam Whitmore. I want to avoid what we did with him last year by bringing him down just because he was injured at the time getting drafted. So it's really the wingspan that did that to me. All right, let's move on to somebody where I really wish we would have saw he was healthy when we saw the G League Ignite this year, especially because it was their last year in existence. It would have been really cool to see him. Just seeing him in person, even though he was in street clothes on the bench, the dude's a huge physical presence. So Modest Buzelis is for us here at 7. This is somebody who this time last year, we're all talking about Cooper Flag right now. People were talking about Modest Buzelis initially at this time last year, of course, until Mitch mentioned this in a previous episode, the G League Showcase, when Alex Starr absolutely destroyed all of them. And then he took the #1 spot of this draft class, kind of ran with it from there. But Montas is somebody who people have a lot of belief in regards to the amount of potential that he has. And there's an argument for him to even be like above both Holland and Dillingham. There's an argument for him to be right there at 4. I can absolutely see that. So Montas might provide what you're looking at with when Jonathan Isaac was healthy in his prime, like really good defensive value, 3-pointers and scoring. Maybe not as crazy defensive what Isaac did, but that's kind of just like what the archetype is of what you're looking at with his 9-category stat set. So again, role player draft and everything. This is still somebody who's valuable. A lot of times you're trying to trade, because you want Jonathan Isaac, or even your Matisse Thybulle fans out there, you want your blocks and steals, you want somebody to settle your defensive categories for you. So that's something that Madas can bring with insane upside to do more than that. There's also not a great floor to do more than that, but the upside is very intriguing for Madas. And so like I mentioned, he could easily, if somebody told me that they have him 4 or even 3 on their Dynasty big board, I'd be cool with that, because Madas is a very, very interesting prospect to me. And Mitch, I know you were a big fan of him too this time of last year. Did you have a quick comment on Madas?
Yeah, I think Madas really provides something that's unique with those block numbers, but also his assist complements him to be kind of like a mini unicorn in terms of a stat set. So, Jonathan Isaac in his prime was a top 20 player. So if Madas can be even, a lighter version of that with assists, that's easily a top 40 contributor. And hopefully he's healthier than Jonathan Isaac, of course.
Right. I mean, we'll see how it works out, but this could be definitely a valuable person to have, especially dynasty wise, at the end of your bench.
Okay, here we have Dalton Connect. He is the oldest prospect in our lottery big board. However, there's a lot to love with him, right? He probably is the second best shot creator in this draft behind Rob Dillingham. I know he is 4 years older, but he does have optimal size. He is a decent weak side shot blocker. His lateral quickness isn't the greatest, but he does have optimal length and size for his position at shooting guard and small forward. So if he can become someone like Bogdan Bogdanovic, someone who is a borderline top 100 player when healthy, I'll take that any day of the week in this type of draft at pick 8.
Very good. Absolutely agree with that. Connect is someone I've been a fan of for a while. And obviously there's not a ton of upside to do more than, like you said, like a Boyan Bogdanovic, but that's still a useful player to have. So that's just kind of the mindset you need to be looking at here. There is, like, we've already accepted the fact that there is no Paolo, there is no Cade, there's no Victor, there's nobody like that, but there is still useful guys. Think about it on your rosters. Think about Aaron Gordon, think about Max Strus, think about Jordan Clarkson. These guys are still useful to have, and a lot of these guys could become players like that. Connect being one of them. So let's look at number 9 here. Stephon Castle. I've seen big boards, NBA big boards, where he's at 1. I've seen big boards where he's lower, like where we have him here. And I think what we're not trusting is the shooting inability and not looking a ton like a point guard, even though he claims to be one. Like, I'm hoping I'm not just looking at kind of a supercharged Dalen Terry here, because then, he might not be somebody that's worth spending this high of a pick on. But I want to believe in his upside. And the main thing that you want to believe in is that he was just a winner. Playing at UConn, playing within that system, he did do a great job. He is national champion. So I would hope that he has some type of, like, higher. I will let's put it this way. I will give credit to his IQ as a basketball player. I think that's going to take him farther than, like I mentioned, someone like Dalen Terry or something like that. And I think he does have more playmaking and better athleticism than him too. He's not as raw of a prospect as Terry is. But you want to see the shot come together, which is the biggest worry for me. And as well as, not being that great of a point guard despite claiming to be one. Do you have a quick comment on Castle? Because, you and I are obviously in consensus when we put this list together. So obviously, you and I are both not super high on him.
Yeah, the statistical translation isn't the greatest with Stephon Castle. And I will say this, there are rumors that he won't slide past Charlotte at 6. But if he does get drafted to the San Antonio Spurs, where he will have the most utilization as a point guard and offensive creator, then yeah, sure, we'll bump him past pick or at number 9 in our big board. But we don't know that. And I just want to reinstate that this is a pre-draft big board where landing spot can definitely shift our ranks.
Yep, absolutely. We're going to do this big board pre-draft, and of course, we're going to do one post-draft once we see where everybody lands. So we're still speculating on where people are going to land. So right now, we're just doing it based off of raw talent alone, not taking landing spot in mind, because the landing spot absolutely influences where these guys are going to end up post-draft big boards dynasty rank wise. All right, let's go now to number 10, somebody who this speculation or even confirmed has received a promise from a lottery team that he's going to be drafted. That's Devin Carter. Again, naming off role players. Let's name off let's name off Josh Hart, which is what I think Devin Carter's stat set's going to look a lot like, being a guard with high rebounding rates. So those out of position rebounds is always somebody that's valuable to have. In addition to providing defense too, being an energy player, providing scoring, potentially some 3-pointers as well. So we like Devin Carter, and I like that he's managed to sneak into the lottery here. I think he's someone, especially towards the back end of these lottery, where there's some winning teams that are selecting back here, like the Kings, like the Oklahoma City Thunder, teams with winning records. Devin Carter going to one of those teams is an absolute just plug and play and watch him go option. I love that. Mitch, quick word on Devin Carter.
Yeah, Devin Carter, I like to see him as a hybrid of Josh Hart and Jalen Suggs. He is on the older side, but that's completely fine in this draft. Age is a complete wash when, everything is a little bit flat in this year of 2024. Even if the rebounding numbers don't completely translate uh, from college to the NBA, that's fine because he does provide really efficient shooting. He's shown a lot of strides on that end of the floor. His steals numbers should definitely translate. And something that is really, really interesting about Devin Carter, he does have a +7 wingspan. So even though he is like 6'2", he does have a 6'9" wingspan that would definitely help with rebounding and being a defensive disruptor.
Absolutely. Devin Carter's a great prospect.
Okay. Zachary Ricochet. This is pretty much like the big difference here between a mock draft and a rookie big board for fantasy basketball. Shea could easily go number one in the real draft. I mean, the odds are almost dead on even with Alex Sarr, but because his statistical profile isn't anything like Alex Sarr in terms of per minute production, Shea drops all the way from potentially 1 and 2 in real life to outside of the top 10 for us here in Dynasty rookie drafts. He's a decent rebounder, not great. He doesn't get any assists. He has more turnovers than assists. He doesn't really get steals. I believe he's maybe at most one even per game. And all these numbers don't essentially translate into the NBA as well. Best case scenario, he's Michael Porter Jr. But even then, I don't know. I don't know. Andrew, Zach is such an enigma for me that I can't really tell because he was so inconsistent earlier into the year, and then he had a really great hot start in the playoffs in France in one of their leagues. But I want to know your thoughts on what you think of him as a fantasy asset versus in real life value.
Well, I'm just not seeing enough rebounds and defense in addition to poor 3-point shooting to really justify it's like am I basically looking at a Torian Prince here, like nine cats category or category wise? So in addition to the combine measurements, small hands, small wingspan, in regards to his size too, that's also things that concern me, as well as his inability to dribble. So factoring all of those things in, I don't think I'm going to be expecting like a whole Jaylen Brown type renaissance of bringing in someone who couldn't really dribble with either hand. He develops the right hand, and then 7 years later now he has a left hand too, sort of. So with Shea, I'm someone who has not been high on him from the get-go. Even when his poor shooting turned into a hot streak, I wasn't really buying it. And a lot of those combine measurements weren't kind of confirmed that for me, because I feel like when I was looking eye test wise, I was like, his arms don't seem that big. Seems like he doesn't have great lateral movement, and verticality wise, he's okay.
No,
But yeah.
actually, Andrew, his max vertical is only 32 inches,
Oh, well, then
which
yeah.
is terrible.
Yeah,
Reed
never mind
Shepherd's
then.
was what, 42?
Yeah. Okay. So that's now even worse. So, if he can't jump, he's not long, he doesn't have, giant hands, there's no dribbling, no, not a ton of scoring upside, just kind of a streaky shooter. This might just be Torian Prince. So we'll see what happens. But Riche is kind of an enigma to us, dynasty rank wise. Okay. Now we're on Cody Williams. So this is somebody that I was very high on personally earlier on in the year. I will, of course, give credit to the fact that he did deal with a lot of injuries. Um, the only reason why I have someone like Riche above him is opportunity. Riche might go to a team like the Wizards, where he's going to be given all the opportunity in the world to try to figure things out. Whereas Cody Williams, it seems like it's going to be sliding to somewhere like 10 or later. So he's going to go to something like the Jazz, or potentially even join his brother in Oklahoma City, where he's going to join a more crowded roster, where he's likely going to be coming off the bench. I mean, he might have come off the bench in a place like, an earlier spot too, but like Riche in Washington, especially, is going to get a lot of minutes. Their only like big man that they have is Marvin Bagley. So it's somebody like Cody Williams falling later like this. That's why I think he's going to be looked at now more as more of a developmental piece. Whereas I personally thought he's going to be coming in as like ready-made. Okay, he's going to make this big jump similar to his brother, but he's going to do it at an earlier age. Whereas now I think this jump, if it's going to come, might not be coming until he's like 20 or maybe even 21. So Williams is now more of a project to me, which is why we have him falling lower than some of these guys who are going to be instant contributors, which dynasty-wise, especially if you're a competing team, it's really nice to have these guys. Or if, let's say you're coming off your last tanking year and you're trying to compete right away, then maybe somebody like a Dalton Connect is enticing to you earlier on because you want somebody to just hit the ground running. And I don't think that's going to be the situation with Williams. I think you're going to need to be patient with him, especially if he goes to the Jazz, and he might have a similar trajectory to what we saw with like Taylor Hendricks, or potentially even longer, like a Jalen Johnson too.
So I know, Andrew, you spoke upon Kyle Filipowski in the last video for the mock draft, but he is really one of my favorite prospects. He's someone who doesn't really hurt you in any statistical category. The only thing potentially is his like free throw shooting, which was a little bit above 70%. I mean, but that's not too bad considering he is a legitimate 7 footer with shoes on. I think he measured in at 6'11". He can pass the ball. He increased his block rate by I think double since his freshman year. Um, so if he gets put into an ideal situation, let's say the Oklahoma City Thunder, or I want to say the Sacramento Kings, where he could play next to Sabonis as a kind of a weak side rim protector that they surely need. Kyle Filipowski doesn't hurt you at all. And you think of someone like Kelly Olynyk, but with more defensive stats that really weigh towards categorical rank. So maybe like a Nikola Vucevic in his prime. Do you remember those years, like 4 or 5 years ago, where Vucevic was a top 15 statistical producer in 9 category leagues? I'm not saying Kyle Filipowski is going to achieve that, but he has that same statistical profile and game in him where he's a plus playmaker. He can provide some steals and some block shots. He can score. He can rebound. Almost rebounded double digits this season at Duke. If everything hits, maybe we can get that ceiling. And at the end of the lottery, he's a pretty safe bet where I don't think he's too skilled to really be a bust in any ways, but he also does have that upside.
All right, so moving on to our last guy here, Isaiah Collier. This is somebody that Mitch and I got the opportunity to watch live play against UC Irvine at home. So for Collier, I personally believe that he could go up this draft board a good amount for us, dynasty rank wise, in the ideal landing spot. And by that, I mean a place with good spacing. If he lands on a team with a ton of spacing, let's say he even falls to 22 to Phoenix and has, Booker, KD, and Beal to play around him. Someone like Isaiah Collier could really, really benefit from that. Or if OKC took him at 12 even, he would have the spacing around him too, or be basically a miniature version of Shea when he's not on the floor. Maybe they get rid of Josh Giddey too. So different options where there's good spacing for him. I really like Collier's outlook. He was, the #1 high school draft recruit in 2023. So he came into the year with a lot of hype, especially because he was playing with Bronny James on USC. But UFC had a rough year, and I think that just affected those players across the board, specifically Collier too, because he was working with no spacing at all. Mitch, you and I were at that game. Those guys, none of those guys could shoot. You and I went to multiple USC games. They have terrible shooters on that team. And our Collier, I think, is somebody who's going to really benefit from NBA spacing, which I think earned him consideration to be in our lottery of our dynasty draft big board here, and someone that I think Mitch and I might have considerations of moving up if he lands in the ideal situation. So what do you think about Isaiah Collier going to a team with good spacing? Obviously, we know the answer if he's on a team that can't shoot, if he goes to Orlando or something like that. But what do you think about a team with good shooters around Isaiah Collier to work the real true skill that he's good at?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail at the coffin with that fit in Phoenix. Phoenix doesn't have a point guard. They're running Devin Booker, Bradley Beal switching off, playing point guard duties. But if they have someone who's just the straight facilitator and they can get Booker and Beal and KD buckets, Collier in a depleted roster like Phoenix can really provide a lot of 9 category value and upside. So at the end of the lottery, he's a great swing. But like you said, Andrew, it ultimately depends on that landing spot.
So that does it. That's 14 rookies covered. So thank you so much for tuning in today. We wish all of you the best of luck with your dynasty draft season, wherever you got your picks at, in regards to startup leagues and rookie draft leagues. So thank you again for tuning in today. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and we will see you next time.